folks, good afternoon. I'm Senate Republican Leader Trey Stewart. It's good to see you all again this week. This is another installment of our weekly press events we do every Tuesday at 12:30. This week, you'll see that we're joined as a Senate Republican caucus by our House Republican colleagues as well, and you're going to hear from some of them today as well as we discuss a really important issue for the state of Maine, which is our lobster industry and all the challenges that they're facing and Republican solutions to some of those problems. You probably have heard about a bill that will be heard in about 30 minutes or so over in the Taxation Committee, LD 191, that I'm putting forward along with a few of my colleagues standing behind me in an attempt to push back on what's become this really unfortunate narrative from Whole Foods and others involved in the group called Seafood Watch. And just to be clear, that group is a dark money group that does not disclose its donors. We don't know who these people are. They're certainly not elected. They're certainly not accountable. And they've been attacking the Maine lobster industry here for far too long. And today is the day that the Maine legislature is going to be pushing back. I want to also note that the state of Maine has had a really storied history, and it's been a bipartisan one amongst our chief executives in the governor's office, from Baldacci to LePage and now Mills, and certainly with our congressional delegation and all of the bipartisan efforts that have gone on there. This should not be a political issue. Supporting a $1.5 billion industry in the state of Maine that is a cornerstone of our economy should not be a partisan issue. I tip my hat certainly to the good work of Susan Collins and others down in DC who have bought us a little bit more time to defend this industry. But it's now time for the state legislature to do its part as well. LD 191, which again you'll hear more on later, is an attempt to prevent Whole Foods, which is, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, an overpriced yuppie chain of grocery stores that does not represent the best interests of Maine and certainly does not represent the best interests of Maine lobstermen and women. And they blindly followed this incorrect science that is jeopardizing and continuing to put a black eye on an industry that is crucial. And at the same time, they're profiting and benefiting from Maine's tax code in the form of the business equipment exemptions that they receive. This bill would prevent that from happening any further. And I hope, frankly, that between now and then we can find a compromise solution that doesn't even require state action. But the point is the legislative branch needs to be doing something more. And today that is going to begin with LD 191 over the Taxation Committee, and I'll speak more on that later. Again, as I mentioned, we are joined today by our House Republican colleagues who I'm going to turn it over to a couple of. First and foremost, I want to thank and appreciate that House Republican Leader, Representative Billy Bob Falkenham is here. He is a lobsterman, and he has some more information that he wants to share as well, and I'll turn it over to him now. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. I am Representative Billy Bob Falkenham. I am a lobster fisherman. I've been fishing my whole entire life, so this issue is very important to me, and I would consider myself an expert in the subject. The first thing I want to talk about is sovereignty over our waters. And right now Maine has sovereignty out to 3 miles. That's considered state waters. In the 129th, we exercised our sovereignty and prohibited oil drilling and oil exploration in our waters. In the 130th legislature, we used our sovereignty to prohibit windmills in state waters. And for many generations, Maine was in charge of managing our waters, our fisheries, and everything that happened in our waters. And at some point during the 1990s, there was a shift where we gave up regulation out to 12 miles, and the state started only regulating our fisheries inside 3 miles. And I remember back then I actually had on my lobster license the EEZ zone, which meant that just by purchasing a state lobster license, I could fish out to 12 miles. And then that changed and we could only fish out to 3 miles, which it worked out fairly well with the federal government. We didn't really have any problems with that. But now the federal government is over-regulating. They have caused regulations that are essentially going to make lobster fishing in federal waters illegal in 6 years. So I think it is time that Maine reclaims her sovereignty and goes out to 12 miles and regulates the waters out to 12 miles. I think that would be an important step and something that I look forward to working on. The other thing I want to talk about is sustainability. Maine lobster fishing is the gold standard of sustainability. For generations, we have regulated the size of the lobsters, throwing back egg lobsters, V-notching females, and everything we've done that my grandparents did and my great-grandparents did have made this industry what it is today, and which is the gold standard of sustainability on the planet as far as I'm concerned, as far as wild-caught fisheries. So we've got these two sustainability lists, Monterey Bay and Seafood Watch, who have said that the Maine lobster is not sustainable, which is an absolute joke. And what we're doing with Senator Stewart's bill is saying that any organization that uses these lists to target Maine lobster won't be the benefit of Maine tax benefits. Maine lobster is one of our core industries in the state of Maine, and anybody that targets Maine lobster should not see the benefit of our tax incentives. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Senator Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Buckingham. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ann Moore, and I represent Senate District 6, which is all of Washington County and 16 communities in eastern Hancock County as well. So this is a major issue in my district for sure. You'll see in your press packets a breakdown of the issues facing our beloved lobster industry. From Eastport to Machias and Jonesport to Winter Harbor, you ask any number of our lobstermen and women who fish Maine's waters what has been a challenge for them in the past few years, and they will tell you this: fuel costs, bait costs, gear costs and loss, closures of vital fishing zones, and a regulatory environment that more resembles the waves of the ocean rather than a level playing field. Maine's iconic crustacean is a billion-dollar industry dating back more than a century. But what is more concerning for most of us has been interference in one of our heritage industries from outside groups that care more about right whales than the livelihoods of our people. There's something wrong with that calculus, especially when the underlying math is wrong. That brings me to Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Program, which Representative Buckingham mentioned, which placed American lobster on its red list of species. As I said loudly last year, along with many others, that was based on faulty data. What's amazing is if you go to their website, the printed copies here, they went as far to respond to the governor and congressional delegation to their responses, they're misguided and completely specious. Red listing was, quote, misinformation. I love that. As a marine research aquarium, you would think they'd have higher research standards than that. Then in November, another environmental group, the Marine Stewardship Council, decided to pile on and say that the U.S. lobster fishing industry was not in compliance with federal rules determined by a judge, mind you, and therefore pulled our sustainability certification for the Gulf of Maine, despite the fact that there have been no whale entanglements in Maine's waters in decades, and more importantly, no deaths. Canada, you're fine, even though you have less regulations than the U.S., and Canadian gear has been involved in entanglements. But Maine, well, sorry, Charlie. And then when we asked the council to reverse the decision, when Maine lobstermen and women are now in compliance due to the omnibus bill passed in Congress last year, all you hear is crickets. No, let me correct that. You just hear the waves of the ocean, right? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Thorne. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore. My name is Jim Thorne. I'm the House Representative for District 35, and I am the ranking Republican member on Marine Resources. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Senator Stewart and our colleagues in the Senate Republicans for offering to have us come in on this, because this is one of Maine's most important issues currently going on. You've heard all the statistics, you've heard all the facts. Maine's lobster industry contributes $1.5 billion, and I think that's an understatement compared to all the other things that could probably be tied into it. One of the things that I wanted to say is Representative Fockingham was kind enough to bring me out on his boat, show me what lobstering was like, because I've only known how to pick potatoes up in Aroostook County. And I came away with the conclusion that if we work half as hard on this issue as lobstermen work, we'll be working twice as hard as we normally do. Because lobster industry is a tough gig. You get up early, you go out, you find your help, you get out, and all the traps that are out there, it depends on the water and the waves and the sea. And it's something that we're here to say, Maine fishermen, Maine lobstermen, we have your back in the legislature. Thank you.
As I close here, and we'll turn it over to questions in just a second, but you know, I think Jim hit the nail on the head just a minute ago. My mother unfortunately passed away about 1.5 years ago, but prior to her getting sick with cancer, she worked on a lobster boat in down East Maine, not far from Representative Falkingham's neck of the woods. And I know that she would be very proud to see us standing here in support of this industry and pushing back on all of the wrong things that are happening right now. And I know too that while today it's Maine lobster, tomorrow it could be Aroostook County potatoes. It could be our forest products sector that's under siege from these completely unelected, unaccountable special interest groups that are dark money groups. And so that really I think underscores the importance here that it's not just about lobster. This is not just about lobster. It's about our entire way of life in the state of Maine that is under siege by these special interest groups. So with that, thanks everybody that spoke earlier today. Happy to answer questions, and in true to form as we've done in the past, we'll start off with questions as it relates specifically to this issue. And then open up the floor as well with whatever time we have remaining until 1 o'clock to answer any other questions. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, what's the value of the tax benefit for Whole Foods that you'd be taking away with the bill?
Stay tuned for the next public hearing because you'll hear more about that in about a half an hour.
Representative Fockingham, so on the state water sovereignty, is that something that the state can do by itself, or do you need federal agreement, federal approval to extend it back out to 12 months?
Actually, I'll give you a partial answer for that, and then if you have more to add to that, I'll let it Senator Brakey speak about that. Yeah, there are actually some states that do exercise that ability already. So we can regulate up to 12 miles. It was done in the past. There's if you look at the charts that we use on our boats now, the 12-mile line is marked on them, and that is a traditional boundary, the 12 miles. So I believe that we can go out there. Right now, it is our wardens that enforce law enforcement, and they're deputized through the federal government to do that and paid through various grants and that sort of thing. But Senator Brakey has been working on this issue, so I'm going to let him pop in and give an answer to that question too.
Well, I'm glad to be sponsoring this bill and to have Representative Falkingham as the lead House co-sponsor on the ocean sovereignty bill. But basically, look, I'm not sure what the federal government's going to say, whether or not we can do it or not. But I'm not really, I think after everything our lobster industry's been through, I don't think we should be sitting around asking for permission from the federal government to protect our lobster industry. And the federal government hasn't respected our sovereignty in the past. We can go back to issues around some of the things in the North Woods and disrespecting kind of our laws in the state around that. I think that if we're going to, if we want to defend the sovereignty of our oceans, we just need to take a stand and say that we're going to do so. And I think constitutionally we're on very solid grounds with that. After all, the states created the federal government, and I don't see anywhere in there where we gave them, in the Constitution, authority over our waters, authority over our waters in this fashion.
Other questions as it relates to this issue, or, yep.
Have you approached the governor's office to ask to work with her about approaching the feds on that issue? I mean, it might not require any law.
Yeah, I haven't spoken with the governor's office about the ocean sovereignty bill, but that said, open invitation to her and to anyone in the House and Senate Democrat caucus, where, you know, when it comes to our lobster industry, I think we're all willing to work together and get to solutions there. So again, I know as Senator Stewart and Representative Falkenham have said, when it comes to our lobster industry, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. I think we all just want to make sure that our lobstermen are not being pushed around by the federal government and these special interest groups.
Sam Patton, Maine Wire. Senator Stewart, this question is for you. In October, you called for an investigation into possible intimidation and bullying of Sue McCrone in Aroostook County by Troy Jackson not to run for state senate. Is there any update or any news on that?
I don't have an update on that. I defer to the McCrums on that issue. That's their conversation. I wasn't privy to it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
1 o'clock over an idea, you can talk to the Crown sponsoring the bill for.
Any other questions? Okay, with that said, thanks everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. We'll see you all later.